Well, hello again. I am getting licked by my dog, and it's so calming. It's almost putting me in a trance. I don't want to drop my coffee. Okay. I am making a more positive video now than the one I filmed last night. It is now time to do my top 10 movies of 2023. I have 10, and in addition to that, I have 6 honorable mentions. Now, I have gone through to refresh my memory of the different things that I said about the various films that I have on this list. So I'm just going to try to touch on the basics of those things. Some, I don't know, I might spend a little more time on than others. Depends on the mood I'm in. But let's get started with the honorable mentions. I have, like I said, 6, starting with The Promised Land. They're in no particular order. I did a review for this recently. I really liked the story. I liked Mads Mikkelsen's acting in here and the very atmospheric sort of feeling it had. And yeah, since it's a recent watch, it's on my mind. And I did go and check all the things that I've watched in 2023. So it's not just the more recent films that have made this list, but the ones that obviously I liked most. Followed by Dungeons and Dragons. What a pleasant surprise this movie was, you guys. I remember seeing an advanced screener of it, and by the time I went in to watch it, I had been hearing some decent things about it, but you know, I'll be honest, I was not convinced by that trailer, but I went ahead and saw it a couple weeks before it came out on the big screen, and it was so much fun. Such an absolute joy to watch this movie, and so I had to give it at least an honorable mention. Next one, Talk to Me. Probably actually my favorite pure horror movie of the year. I thought this was very well done. It's an A24 film. The concept was interesting, very atmospheric. I rewatched it again not long ago with D Movie Man and Simon, my YouTube buddies, and just was reminded yet again of what a solid piece of storytelling this was. I really enjoyed this entire package. The storytelling, the acting, the direction was great. It was I think a couple of YouTubers that worked on this. Maybe they were brothers or something, and they have a YouTube channel, which was really cool. So yeah, if you haven't watched this yet, check it out if you like horror especially. Next film on the list is Knock at the Cabin, an M. Night Shyamalan film. Sorry, my dog is really distracting me with this licking. Okay, she's licking my arm. I actually really enjoyed this movie. It seemed like it was pretty divisive when it came out, and I think maybe some people were a little bit upset that there was no typical Shyamalan twist at the end, but I feel like that was actually kind of the twist. That there was no twist. That these really were the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and they were bringing a terrible message for this family to have to decide on something. And I just felt like the way everything wrapped up in the end and how the evolution of the characters along the way was really well done, and I especially liked Dave Bautista's acting in here. He was excellent. Equalizer 3. I fully enjoyed this film. I liked that Denzel was a convincing badass in here. I liked the location where it took place. I felt like Dakota Fanning's character was kind of thrown in there just so they could have a role together in this movie, but whatever, it's fine. I just felt like it was a fitting ending to the trilogy. Pretty solid all the way around for me. And Megan. How could I forget Megan? Megan was the first movie I saw on the big screen in 2023, and I felt so optimistic about the year after having seen that, and then shortly after that seeing Plane, and it was so much fun, really solid. But yeah, Megan was a great start to the year. It was certainly nothing super unique, but I felt like it was carried off very well, and so I wanted to definitely give kudos to that movie for starting this year off great for me. The year as a whole didn't end up being as stellar as the start of it felt like it would be, but you know, there were definitely several films that I did enjoy watching. Okay, moving on to number 10, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I knew from the moment this movie was over that I liked it more than the first one. Some people weren't so crazy about the fact that it sort of ends on a cliffhanger-ish, but I went into it knowing that this is going to be a part 1. Actually, it's more like a part 2 and a 3-part trilogy. I'm really looking forward to the conclusion of this. I liked the emotional impact of the story. I felt it. It felt so much more hard-hitting than the first one. The animation styles were so unique and interesting, and there was just so much stuff that was thrown in. It feels like multiple viewings will just reveal reveal more and more and more as you watch it. The voice acting was great, as it was in the first movie. I really love the character of Miguel O'Hara. I think he was my favorite of the new people that were shown. I loved the positive family messaging, as I had mentioned in my review, between Miles and his mom and dad. And despite feeling that they went a little bit overboard on all of the different Spider-Men in this crazy world where some stuff took place, but the positives really more than made up for that. And the animation was so gorgeous and so well done and so realistic in different ways of facial expressions and body movements that it almost made me feel like it was motion capture. But yeah, at the time I made the review for this, I predicted it was going to be in my top 10, and it was. Okay, number 9. Extraction 2, you guys. I had called the first movie a bloody action film with heart, and when I did the review for Part 2, I opened with a bloody action film with heart, Part 2. This movie, to me, was an action movie lover's dream. It was so intense, the right kind of intense, so intense that I felt like I needed to pause and take a break. That's how wound up I was getting. Really very convincing, pulled you in. Despite some cons, and there were some cons, it veered a little bit into John Wick-y territory in some of the scenes, or maybe 1 or 2 scenes. This was still, to me, much more effective and more impactful than John Wick 4. To me, it's superior to John Wick 2, 3, and 4. Both of the Extraction movies are. Despite being crazy, just almost nonstop action, it feels well-paced and it feels proper. That it is the way it is. It feels also like it's more rooted in reality, more suspenseful action scenes, action that felt proper to the story, like I mentioned. A great kick-ass female character in here. Same character from the first movie, but we see more of her in this one, and I loved her character even more than in the first one. She was so well written, not a Mary Sue, but she could hold her own, even though she could still get her butt kicked, and she did. Great dramatic acting on the part of Chris Hemsworth. This is the type of action movie that I like. Like I said, yeah, there were moments that I had to pause it to take a breath. That's how crazy suspenseful it was, and the emotional depth that Chris Hemsworth brought to his character, and also to just this whole story in general. It just gave it weight that made me love it so much, and yeah, so I had to include it. All right, number 8. A Million Miles Away. I went to go see this movie, an advanced screener. This movie came out on Amazon Prime, but they also played it on the big screen for one night or something. It's the story of Jose Hernandez, the first migrant worker to become an astronaut, make it up into space. I really loved the feel-good nature of the story. The chemistry between Rosa Salazar and Michael Pena. It was a very uplifting, just family-friendly, sweet, with some wonderful positive messaging, and was not angsty. There was no divisive, oh gosh, Tiva! She's been licking me nonstop since I started recording. What was I saying? It wasn't angsty. There was no divisive messaging. It's just wonderful and unifying storytelling that I feel like can appeal to something in all of us, something that we can all identify with and understand. And so, yeah, love this movie. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. Okay, number 7. Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Yeah, this movie. Oh, you guys, I was not prepared for the emotional kick in the heart this film was going to be. I kid you not. I almost wept. Well, there were times when I think maybe I was. Oh my gosh. It was dark, darker than the first two, and yet at the same time, it still had that comedic tone that we come to associate with Guardians of the Galaxy. It still felt proper. It worked for me. It was a heartbreaking story about Rocket. It was basically almost like Rocket's sort of origin story. And it had this emotional depth that really hit hard. Also, thematic elements that carried so much weight to them, despite this being a comic book movie. The loss of the relationship between Peter and Gamora. That was sad to watch that, even though Gamora was back, she wasn't really. The High Evolutionary was a formidable, scary, maniacal, awful villain. And I loved the family feel between these characters, that family dynamic between them that they've had pretty much since the first movie. I'm wondering though if there's a longer cut of this. I think I might have mentioned this in my review. Given the feeling of some rushed portions at the end, I wouldn't mind seeing a longer cut of Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I felt like it was a great end to a really solid trilogy of comic book movies. Okay, number 6. Sorry, I had to... What the hell? Sorry, I had to pause the recording because my coffee was getting cold and this dog was licking the hell out of my arm and it was super distracting. And so while I finished my coffee, I was watching some live stream. Some of my buddies are live streaming all at the same time and I'm just so distracted. So yes, I paused almost halfway through. Number 6, Godzilla -1. You guys, this was an excellent big screen experience, especially coming right off of the disappointment of the previous night, like 2 stinkers back to back. It was a whole mess. Those 2 stinkers ended up on my top 10 worst list. If you've seen that already, you will know. I remember with great fondness how much the audience loved it, and that was really fun to be there and experience that with them. There was applause afterwards. I was one of the people applauding. Great action, not overexposure to Godzilla, which I personally really enjoyed. If there's too much exposure, to me that lessens the effectiveness. And so because it wasn't too much of him, it was enough to really make us worried about the human protagonist in the story. Yeah, they were just handled so well. The pacing was good. I really liked the human characters in here. We really cared about those people and wanted the best for them. And we were afraid of Godzilla because of the absolute and utter destructive, like the carnage that he caused and the danger that he posed to these people who were just trying to rebuild their place. And he was coming along and just wiping it completely off the map. And now I do finally understand why it was called -1. And of course, it makes complete sense to me. I remember that I liked the warm, cozy feel of the color palette. That gave me like warm fuzzies almost, even though this was like a action sort of disaster type of film or creature monster movie. I really loved that water chase scene when he first shows back up again and he's chasing their boat. I thought that was just pulled off so well. And the final showdown with Godzilla was just a solid and satisfying scene to me. Also, I enjoyed the positive messaging of the value of life and how, some characters, or at least one of the characters, expressed that, throughout the war, they had just devalued life and it was time to value life again. And I thought that was just a really wonderful message. I also like the emotional scenes that we got with the main character and the trauma that the war had caused him, his PTSD and his guilt of having survived through those experiences. One of the cons I had mentioned about this movie regarding the mail service and how I felt like it was unrealistically fast. Someone mentioned in the comments that... Whoa. Someone mentioned in the comments that you couldn't tell, I guess because, obviously we couldn't read the writing on these envelopes, but he was actually sending those letters out via military mail, which had more priority than regular mail, and it was also faster. So that part of my review no longer holds true anymore. So yeah, just a fantastic movie experience, and the fact that this film was made for $15 million or less absolutely puts all of our big budget comic book highfalutin films to absolute shame. Shame. I feel like that scene from Game of Thrones. Shame, shame. That's what this movie did to a lot of our blockbuster CGI heavy movies of this year and previous years. Okay, number 5. American Fiction. Absolutely loved this movie. I loved Jeffrey Wright's character in here. I loved his performance. I loved the satirical messaging in this movie. Plus, just in general, not just Jeffrey Wright, but all the other actors involved. The acting was just great. The emotional depth was heartfelt. It felt organic and it felt believable. It had great situational humor, cringe comedy just because of the whole situation going on in this movie. But it wasn't goofy or ridiculous, not slapsticky. It was what I found out later that this had been adapted from a book. I did nominate this movie for multiple awards in the critics group that I'm in, including Best Adapted Screenplay. So I'm hoping that this movie can win something. Yeah, it was an absolute blast, and I hope you guys will check it out. It might be on Amazon Prime now. I know it's supposed to come there. But yeah, check it out if you get the opportunity. Okay, number 4. Seriously, Levi. Okay, number 4. Gothics. Only documentary on my entire list of best films of 2023. I recently watched this. I think it was last week. My review for it went up today. What is today? The 28th, I think, of December, which is when I'm filming this. I really felt like this was a powerful profile of an individual's encounter with the destructive nature of cancel culture and the ramifications that had for her. Good and bad. I mean, because there were things that happened with her afterwards. She's in a totally different place in her life now. Things are definitely better for her, but just the story of her experience, it was very infuriating to see the way she was treated. And also because my microphone. I know her. I had her on my channel. We did an interview a couple years ago. I felt a level of personal connection with this material, so I couldn't go without putting this somewhere on the list. And because it's so recent, and because it was just such a just emotional story, and it got me all annoyed on her behalf and angry at just the condition of social media and the toxic landscape that it can be for a lot of people. I had to put this on my top 10, and so yeah, there it is. Okay, number 3. Society of the Snow. You guys, this movie was Chibi. Hold on a minute. Sorry, guys. I will be lucky if I can get this video done. I have been interrupted multiple times. Society of the Snow comes in at number 3. I really wish that I had seen this movie before I entered my nominations for the different films in various categories in the critics group that I'm in, because honestly, this movie would have gone on there, if not in the group with best films of 2021, one of the absolute best films of 2023, but also best foreign language film. I did a recent review for it. It went up this week. It's the story of these survivors of the plane crash in the Andes in 1972 and the lengths that they had to go to in order to survive. This movie was very powerful. It was emotional. It was just like a gut punch to the heart. Oh, God. That makes no sense. It was like a gut punch to my emotional heart. That's what it felt like. And it was just, the acting in here was great. The main character, this guy, the character that he plays, and the journey that his character goes through emotionally and physically is just so heartbreaking. And it was just overall such a harrowing, haunting tale of loss and survival. And I hope that you guys will take the time to watch it when it comes out on Netflix in like a week. I think a week from today, maybe. Definitely worth the watch. It is subtitled. It's in Spanish. That really should be a non-issue. This movie is excellent. Please watch it. I found out some really interesting things about it afterwards, about how they filmed this. They filmed it chronologically, and the backdrop was definitely the Andes. They replicated the exact area where the landing had happened. Just the logistics of how they did it. They really were filming in the cold. They really were hungry. They weren't at death's door like how the real people were, but they did put these actors through the emotional and physical ringer. And the result of that was just an immensely powerful story. If you can check it out, please do. We're almost done, you guys. I think I've actually been moving along at a decent clip. All right, number 2. Sound of Freedom. For some really dumb reason, this movie was divisive among certain groups of people, and the establishment Hollywood crowd, I guess, would like to pretend that this movie never existed. I don't think it's going to be nominated for any sort of actual award, and that's, the standard awards, whatever shows. I did nominate it in the critics group that I'm in. I just felt like that the subject matter, the story of child trafficking, it's such a heartbreaking, disgusting, infuriating thing to think about. And this story did cover that in a very tactful way. It handled the subject matter about as tastefully as it could be handled, and the acting was really, really good. The child actors in here were excellent, and I felt like Caviezel turned in one of his strongest performances that I've ever seen. And I really do recommend. I know I've read up on the true story. I know that a lot of stuff in here was supposed to be factual. There was some stuff that was fictionalized for dramatic purposes at the end, which I knew when I was watching it. I could just kind of intuitively tell that it was, and when I looked it up, yes, it was. But for purposes of telling a cohesive, uplifting-ish story, given the subject matter, I felt like they did a really good job with that. The true life situation of these kids and just knowing that this is still a thing is very sobering and heartbreaking. And I really feel like this was a movie that everyone should watch. Whatever you think about Jim Caviezel, whatever the hell ever you think about Tim Ballard or whatever, this stuff is a thing that's really happening. And you may not like the messengers, but that doesn't really diminish the reality of what they're talking about. And the children in here did just an amazing job with their acting. I absolutely loved the performances that they gave to us. Just so heartbreaking. Some really moving scenes that definitely brought members of the audience to tears for sure. Okay, number one, and it should be a surprise to no one who has watched any of my reviews this year. Yep, it's definitely going to be The Covenant. Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. This film, oh my gosh. Maybe part of my love for this was that it helped redeem Jake Gyllenhaal for me, in my mind, after the utter annoyance that he was in The Guilty. And I just got to where I did not want to hear his voice ever again. Don't open your mouth, Jake. I don't want to hear it. You have the most annoying voice. I mean, I really was so down on this guy. And I didn't even want to see Ambulance because that was a movie that came out shortly after The Guilty. And I was like, nope, I'm done. But I heard about this movie. I knew it was a Guy Ritchie movie. I do like Guy Ritchie stuff. And I was like, okay, I will endure this despite Jake Gyllenhaal's voice. And you know what, you guys? He was fine. He did a great job in here. He wasn't annoying. His voice wasn't annoying. Whatever. I guess I'm over that. Also, I think it helped make up for the disappointment that Guy Ritchie's earlier movie in the year, Operation Fortune, was, because I was not really happy with that film at all. But I loved this story, a story of sacrifice, duty, loyalty to your fellow soldier / man, and how it really hit home to me, the sacrifice, not that I wasn't aware of it already, but just seeing this movie really kind of grounded this reality of the danger that these people put themselves in to act as these Afghanistan interpreters to help the United States when they were there in Afghanistan. And just knowing that many of these people have been left behind, many of them lost their lives, just thinking of the disgraceful withdrawal from that country that the United States had a couple of years ago. And I don't know, it's just something so well done about this story. And Dar Salim's acting in here, I absolutely loved his performance. I don't think I'd ever seen him in anything else before, but I loved his performance so much that I nominated him for Best Supporting Actor. And I hope he gets some recognition at least. I hope I'm not the only one that has nominated this guy for an award, because he was the way he played his part, even though this movie was fiction, it was still true to life in that it presented the danger that these people were in. And the way he played his part, some of the scenes between him and Jake, and specifically some of the scenes of him dragging Jake's character through the Afghanistan mountains and wilderness and trying to avoid the Taliban along the way, and what he had to push himself to do. And there was this one scene where his character just got like the wagon thing was stuck on a rock, and he just kind of almost gave up in that moment, just like set the thing down and went and sat down and had like this mini breakdown. The way he played that part, you guys, that hit me so hard, and I felt so much emotion for him and his situation, and which just made me think about and how like the way he played that part, he's about to break down completely, and he wants to cry and just lose it completely, and yet he sat there and he was just like pulling it in, reining it in, trying to just get it all under control. And it made me feel so much empathy for him and just for so many men in general that have been put in these situations, wars and fighting and whatever your personal ideas about things like that may be. They have been put in some of the worst situations that you could imagine. And just the pressure that is put on men and the sacrifices that so many men have made, and largely feels like it's unappreciated more and more, especially in today's time, given the very toxic environment and toxic attitudes that are shown towards and about men. And I really hate that. And there was just something so profoundly touching to me about this movie and these strong men and their bond with each other. Sorry. And I just loved it on such a deep level that it was something that I could never forget. And I think this movie held top spot from the moment I saw it. So I had to keep it there. There really wasn't anything that could unseat it. This is a movie that I could watch multiple times and have this part of my library. And I highly recommend it to anyone who likes movies like this. I would say especially if you're a Guy Ritchie fan, even though it doesn't really feel like a Guy Ritchie movie. So yeah, that's my... Hold on. Sorry. This has been the most chaotic recording ever. That's my list for 2023. It's a much more positive list, a more positive tone than the previous video. I'm curious to know what your list is for top movies of 2023, and the next thing that I'll be recording will be the most anticipated movies of 2024. I went back and looked at the list that I'd made for my most anticipated movies of 2023, and some of those never came out, and I don't know if they ever will, which is kind of a bummer. Like Salem's Lot never came out, and there was another one, the Gremlins movie, that never came out. Yeah, kind of a bummer, but oh well. I'm looking forward to what the next year will bring. And I think that's all I have to say for this. So I'm wrapping this up, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Adios.